So we come to the last part of the story, which is Savitri meeting death and bringing back Satyavan. So here also we see in the original story, as the story goes, Savitri follows death, and initially death says, "Do not come near me or with me, because I am going to a domain where nothing can live. So if you go, you will meet the same fate." It is a kind of paradox because soul is immortal. It goes into the domain of death and comes back. But that's what initially death tries to dissuade her. Then Savitri continues, and death says that you seem to be very courageous and you deserve a reward. So, what reward can I give you for your courage that you have followed me up till this point? And Savitri, something, see, these things may pass on, we have all read it, but look at it. Savitri, what does she ask for? She says, "I want the sight of my father in law restored and his kingdom." Now, this is so strange. She is at this point asking neither for Satyavan nor anything for herself. In fact, she will not ask anything for herself. This is the sign of the greatest of yogis. And so death is happy in the traditional story. And he says, "Okay, now you go back." But after some time, he sees that Savitri is still following him. So he says, "What do you want now?" He says, "See, this is not enough. If I go back, my father-in-law, he would want that there should be a progeny, continuation of the race. So I would want to have that." So he says, "Okay, 100 sons and daughters. Now you go back." But he sees Savitri still following death. And then death says, "I have granted you all that I could grant. I can't give you anything more." He says, "But your boon itself creates a problem for me. How am I supposed to have 100 children without Satyavan?" Now death is caught in a kind of a dharmic problem. So she tells him that if you tell me to go back without Satyavan, either your boon cannot fructify or else there will be adharma. So now death is caught up, and he reflects on Savitri's wisdom, praises her, and says, "Okay, I give you Satyavan," and she returns. So this, the original story ends there. But there are few hints even in the original story. And one of them is that death, which is yama, changes into dharma. So there are two laws that operate. According to one group of law, Satyavan is dead. There is the fatal hour, the stroke is chosen, and he cannot come back. But equally there is another law, and it is the law of dharma. Dharma is greater than the law of death. So as we have been saying that in Indian conception, death is a shadow of Surya, shadow child, if we may say so. All these stories are very clearly symbolic. Also 100 offsprings. So we'll touch upon the symbol. Often we'll hear rishis having 100 offsprings. Now, of course, we are not talking of test tube babies and cloning and all that. But offspring always meant the new, when two powers, forces, beings, energies, they combine. Something is created that is new. That's what an offspring is. So these offsprings are portions of a new creation which come through the meeting of Savitri and Satyavan, meaning thereby, if we go back to the original symbol, Satyavan is the human soul and Savitri the divine mother. And wherever the two come together, new possibilities emerge. These are the offsprings. So we have these command, one of the first command given to Kardam Rishi, which is there in one of the stories. So he is asked, "What am I supposed to do?" He says, "You must have lot of offsprings." This is what is misunderstood in certain religions. So they take it very literally. And they keep producing children like, rabbits and cats, but not realizing if you do that, you are weakening the genetic pool and you are actually creating your own destruction. Whichever species physically produces more children dies earlier. It's a known thing. But that's how human beings understand that if I blow up myself, I'll get some place in heaven. It's not. It is a heroic death is not this. Heroic death is when you fight for the truth inside yourself. When you slay falsehood which is within you. This is the original sense. So offspring, incidentally, even in vision or dream, when one sees a child, it doesn't mean that the child wants to come to the family. Maybe or may not be. But it means a new possibility. Maybe it is a vision of the soul or a new possibility that is going to emerge. So this is the original story. The other aspect of this story is again very fascinating, that Savitri is able to follow death, and he says, you are very courageous. He is yielding. So the another part is that death yields if we do not lose courage and hope. That's what we'll see in Savitri. What is death? We'll come to that. So it begins to yield before the courage and faith and the yogic power that Savitri has accumulated. It yields step by step. It is not going to yield immediately. But eventually it yields completely and Satyavan is back. In the original story, we know that Satyavan goes on to live for 400 years. And what it means is that in the Savitri story, in the first part of the project, immortality, so there should not be an untimely death. One must live for a full life. That's what we see in the Isha Upanishad. Kurvan nevehe karmani jiji visheshatang sama. So the Rishi prays that may we live for 100 long years. 100 long years is not a literal 100 long years, but what it means is that I must live the fullness of my life, which is needed for the full blossoming of the possibilities that in one life I could achieve. So for that there was the 4 ashramas, and at each stage one goes through, and eventually, or the mission that one had to accomplish, when one leads that, then one has lived a full life. So it's not 100, but it's the fullness of life. So that was the possibility, that time which Savitri had actuated, that those who turn to the divine, now if you put it in this way, those who turn to the divine and work for the divine, who are connected to the divine, like Savitri and Satyavan, and given themselves to the divine, like Satyavan has given himself to the divine, they should not be taken away by death in such an untimely way. They must lead the fullness of their life and fulfill their mission. This is a yogic truth which everybody realizes who takes to the path. They have to be released from the law of death. This Savitri had accomplished. But there is something which is not there in the story, but in Indian households, we grew up saying that at the end of the story, every story actually, we would say, Jaisa inke जीवन में हुआ वैसा हम सब के जीवन में हो. So what happened to Savitri must happen in everybody's life. Meaning thereby the collective dimension comes in. Now, this is the framework. Aurobindo brings into it, again, as always, the entire universe. So to start with, what is death? We all take it for granted that, he is the Lord of this world. And in Indian thought, if we go back, we have this Martyalok and we have the realms of the immortals. So what is Martyalok? Martyalok is where death is there. But death is there because ignorance is there. Why we die? We don't know our soul. Why we die? Because we identify with a limited frame, and limitation is by its very nature. A finite portion has to yield to the infinite which is all around, unless it finds a way to join the two to be joined. This is what we see in the Isha Upanishad. Vidyancha yastadvedo bhayam saha. Man is meant to ultimately accomplish that. The finite becomes an instrument and the infinite pours through it. And we can look at it very simply. Arjuna has the bow is finite, Arjuna is finite. But behind him is the infinite. Krishna, not just the body, but Krishna, the aparime. So it is he, the infinite, who stands and uses the finite as an instrument and a channel. This was the possibility, and this is the highest consummation of humanity at that point of time. And yet the body dies after a point. Arjuna did grow weak, he died. Now why is that? Because while the infinite can pour through the mind, no end of wisdom. That's why when we use the word Vedant, it is a kind of I don't want to use the word oxymoron, but it's a kind of a strange paradox. Can there be end of knowledge? There is always something to be known. But Vedanta is about the fundamental reality, To that extent, yes. But it doesn't automatically mean that all that is going to happen in the future, all that is happening in the stars, in the galaxies, is automatically known, because there are always things in the unmanifest which are going to manifest over a period of time. So, if we take the completeness of knowledge, not only in essence and detail, but also details, there is always something yet to be known. So, the mind can join with the infinite and have access to all this knowledge which is not yet present upon earth, and become an expressing channel for this infinite knowledge. Even the heart can open to infinite love and say that, as we find in Savitri, a wonderful mother of unnumbered souls. Even life can open to infinite energy. We know that yogis, especially with the awakening of Kundalini, tremendous amount of energy begins to flow. But what happens to the body? The body has not yet opened. It also can, it must, because ultimately every finite can and must open to the infinite, and thereby arrive at this perfect consummation. But the body is not able to. And the body is the real, if one may say so, the stronghold of this darkness. So what does death destroy? It can only destroy the body. Because body matter has emerged from the dark inconscient. So it holds it. It won't let it go. Other things come up by evolution. Even the body evolves, but slowly. But it holds it very tightly. That's why even when a yogi has realized inner things, the body is still subject to certain conditions. And that project will be complete only when even the physical immortality is achieved. So, Aurobindo takes death as the force that opposes this kind of emergence from the inconscient toward the superconscient. But what really is death? In Savitri, it comes at the end. In the story, we have Yama changing into Dharmaraj. Yamaraj changing into Dharmaraj. So, who is Yama? The law of truth has assumed this form. So, Aurobindo speaks about this because there is only one reality. There cannot be two. You can't say that there is the immortal domain and here there is somehow darkness has sprung forth. If there is only one, there cannot be two. So, it is He who is all effulgence, through a process of involution, becomes this limited, helpless creature, this darkness. It is He who is all truth, becomes its opposite by a process of successive involutions and becomes falsehood. It is He who is all consciousness, does this Atma Vilopan, Atma Gopan, hiding himself and becomes unconsciousness. And we can understand it in, there are a number of things in the world. The Veda is everywhere. So, a very simple way to understand involution and evolution is that what is a seed? See, fruit is fine, flowers are fine, leaves are fine. But what is it that contains the entire tree in its most concentrated form? The seed, which we normally throw away. It's useless. But it is the seed which contains the whole tree, its entire magnificence, possibility, joy, the fruits, flowers, leaves, everything is there in that little tiny seed. This is involution. Or if you want to take, and that seed has to first go inside the earth, in the darkness it must grow, then toward the light. Or if we take another example, what really is the seed of a human body or a human child which will be born? See, it's a small little, it's a wonder and a miracle that there is a tiny little seed. Can see it only under microscope, and it goes inside the womb. But what it is going to become? A seer, a sage, a hero, or maybe, the other kind. But look at this possibility. This is involution. That the entire, the human beings, the two beings who come together, and behind them so much more, they get compressed into one little seed. And from that seed, that little plasm, that little gene, there will emerge the seer, the sage, the saint, the hero, the martyr, the sacrificant. All this with possibility is there. So now we have two ways of looking at life. One is outward look, and the other is the deeper possibility. So outward look is it's all genes. But the other part is how these genes become all this, what is compressed inside the gene that is driving them to grow and evolve and release possibilities. So darkness is nothing but the, as Aurobindo says, magic of self-hidden light, because there are no two. The divine can't say you bring from somewhere darkness. He has become the world. So he becomes the darkness. And why he becomes the darkness? Why? Because for the same reason that he wants to become many. Eko ham bahushyam. So why doesn't he simply multiply himself, clones? Because there is a problem. He also wants an infinite varied world. Clones are same. One divine, many divines, all same. He doesn't want that. After all, he is infinite. Infinite possibilities must emerge in creation. So he enters into a seed state, because only through a process of a complex, many-sided evolution where each soul takes unique challenges. See, all of us have a unique journey. No two journeys are the same. That's why yoga is real-time practice. It's not simply sitting in meditation. Each one will have his own way, unique challenges. So when you face unique challenges and unique aspects of the journey, each one will grow into one kind of divinity, a kind of Godhead. Let's say somebody had a life of struggle and faced it like a hero, will likely to grow into the heroic, the strength, the power aspect of the divine. But somebody who was more keen to know will grow more towards that Maheshwari aspect very naturally. So this is how the divine possibilities are hidden as a seed in the little, what emerges as the psychic being. And they are buried in the darkness. So now comes the problem. Darkness says they are mine. I am not going to release them. They are my little babies. Martilok. So this is a perverse kind of love, where you hold the baby by the apron strings. There are mothers who will say, I don't want my baby to go further. But you have to release. You have to let the baby go and face the adventure. Divine himself has done that. So darkness doesn't release easily. It believes that if it does that, it will lose its hold. So it wants to keep these souls as long as possible within the realm of darkness, and it allows, because it has no choice. There is a compulsion in things, secret compulsion. But slowly, okay, you can go to next level. So child says, now I want to sleep separately, mama. Are you sure? Okay, next to my bed. Then the child grows up a little more. I want more space. This is exactly the same story. More space. Okay, you have your separate room. Then he says, more space. I want my own house, maybe next to you. Okay. No, mama, I want to go far and travel and, gain in experience and grow in strength. Okay. So this is the same story. Death ultimately will concede, but it must see that one is ready. It's a job description. So it has to allow the soul to grow in strength and wisdom, but it overdoes its work. So Yama is a restrainer. See, that's how he's Yamaraj. Why? Because the soul seeks freedom and infinity. But you're not allowed so readily and easily. So it restrains. It will, because it knows if you are given freedom, you may become the titan or the god. Both dangers are there. God can allow that freedom. When somebody asked someone in Ramana Ashram, one of the, really a person who was quite well into the yoga, he says, everywhere we see these different lines, men, women, all the different lines going together. But in Sri Aurobindo ashram, people go together and they mix so freely. Isn't it dangerous? It is like, what is it called? Fire and butter, ghee. Whatever is ghee is called in English. So he says, he replied, we don't understand, but he replied, yes, it is true, but Sri Aurobindo and the mother are divine, so they can manage it. Anywhere else it won't work out, but they are divine. They know how to handle this situation. So there is the phase of evolution in which we grow in darkness, and then there is the phase when we open to light. So initially, all human beings are children of Diti, Daityas. And because they are children of Diti or division, they have a hunger through which they want to possess, take more and more, because impulse is to become infinite. So they want more. They think by this means they will become infinite. And then there are children of Aditi, undivided consciousness. They don't have to do that. They are fulfilled and satisfied in the Divine Mother. And because they belong to the Divine Mother, everything that they need is there for them. That's what the Isha Upanishad says. That Ma Grida Kasya Siddhanam. It's all of the Divine, for the Divine. So whatever you need, you don't have to worry about it. It will come because you belong to the Divine Mother. So these are the two stages of human growth. And yoga is the transition from this darkened state to that state from Diti to the children of Aditi. Sri Aurobindo says this very beautifully in that chapter in Essays on the Gita, where chapter 16, Devasuri Sampada. So he says, don't start thinking that you are a Deva and others are Asuras. He says, man starts as an Asura. It is by conversion to spiritual life that he becomes a Deva. It's not like everybody believes he is a Deva. Why? Because we don't like to see our Asur Gun. Others are Asuras. So he says, man starts his journey as an Asura, which means children of death, forces of death and evolve. So now what is the tussle in evolution, in creation? Our one leg is pulled by or one hand. Leg is a very dangerous situation. One hand is pulled by the Asura. He doesn't let go. And the other is pulled by the Divine. Who will win? It's a long foregone conclusion. But why doesn't the battle become easy? Divine, what is there? He can just pull it. Well, because that other hand of ours which the Asura holds, we tell him, hold it more tightly, hold it more tightly. So if the Divine pulls with all his strength, we know what will be the situation. So it takes the form of struggle. That's why the mother speaks about the sunlit path. If we take the sunlit path, then the struggle will be minimum. Sunlit path means I have given myself to you. That is the baby cat. What you do with me is, I am your baby. But normally we, give one hand very firmly, and the Asura also holds. He knows, if I let go, he's gone. So Divine Mother, what does she do? She talks to those parts in us which are darkened parts, and slowly starts clearing the darkness and its influence upon us in the mind, in the heart, in the life, eventually in the body. That's why the process is long. This aspect of the yoga of transformation is described in part 3. How does it start? We have the book of death, which has two main. One is the book of eternal night, in which we have two cantos. Two cantos are, one is journey towards the eternal night, the voice of the darkness. Towards the black void is the first one, and the second is journey toward the eternal night and the voice of the darkness. So first the question is there anything like eternal night? Well, it's a seeming. It seems eternal, but with Savitri and Satyavan together it cannot be eternal. That's the paradox. So there is this talk about eternal night in certain scriptures, not Indian thought. But it seems like eternal, it seems like endless. And one example is when we are depressed. See how it looks will it ever end? Maybe it is going to end round the corner, but we will prolong it. Why? Because Messrs. Death and Company are overactive. It's only in depression. Will it ever end? But when it comes to joy, we say, oh, it is going to end soon. Why this? Why can't life be full of joy and beauty? This is how Messrs. Death and Companies hold us. So there is the eternal night toward the black void, and the mother says, when you are Savitri, we find that even in that dense darkness, the lesson of Savitri is that the Divine Mother is still there. Satyavan cannot see. He doesn't know. He is carried by death. But she is there. She fights our battles. So there is a yoga which seems to be going on, our effort and things like that. But there is a yoga which is going on in the background. Not only in the individual, also in the collective. Because death is not an individual phenomena. Darkness is not an individual phenomena. It is there in the whole world. And she fights that battle. And then we have the next book where we have the book of the double twilight. So how does this darkness begin to fade? Suddenly human beings begin to be inspired. There comes a stage of growth. One stage is where they believe in the reality of darkness. And they live according to that. Falsehood, darkness, unconsciousness is their way of life. But the next stage is when even in this realm of death, something like a light breaks into the mind. Higher portions of the mind. So that's where the light comes and creates the surge towards an ideal. That's when human beings say, I am going to live by a certain ideal. All adolescents should be like that. It's something very beautiful. But death says, wait, I have my agents already there. Who are the agents? Mommy, Papa will tell you it doesn't work like that. If you escape the mommy, papa, teachers will tell you, my child, be practical. Ideal is all okay. It's in the air. Gossamer air. It's not real. Reality is this. So we have the double twilight. One is the outbreak of the God, the morning. When in the early youth of life, we are filled with ideal. So this is the first twilight, is the twilight of the ideal. This is the twilight of the gods. Heaven inspires us. The gods fill beautiful things, thoughts and urges and impulses inside us. But then the next is the gospel of death and the vanity of the ideal. So in the next canto, everybody keeps saying all this is okay. They say it is there in books. Do it when you are old. Like Nachiketa's father, Vajashrava's. When the cow is old, it cannot give milk. Then you give it to the gods. Turn towards spiritual life when you have accumulated lot of money. Post-retirement spiritual life. Why? Because before retirement, ensure your material life. Post-retirement, when you die, book a seat in heaven. Someone wrote to Aurobindo, I have done with all my duties. I have, my children are all married. My wife is settled. I have arranged all for her. House is built, everything. Now I want to come. Applying. He applies to the ashram and want to apply to practice yoga. I want to come to the ashram. The mother would say, Aurobindo said, this is the time to apply to the graveyard. Because when there is no energy left, yoga is a tremendous pursuit. It's the greatest adventure. So anyways, so we have God, death says, all this is Savitri, eternal love. Where is eternal love? All love is nothing. It's all emotions, chemistry. Scientists have discovered that it is serotonin going up and down in the brain. It's adrenaline. It has nothing to do with love and all this. Neurons, mad people love. Sane people are rational. So, Savitri replies. Then we have the next canto, the debate of death and love. So, now, see, slowly death is getting convinced. Because Savitri doesn't concede. So the next, there is a debate Death gives all kinds of possibilities and logic. Savitri replies with a counter logic. And then finally, he goes to the earthly real. So when all logic fails, ultimately say, but the experience of life is this, that nothing ultimately happens. So that is the earthly real. Earthly real is when the sunlight sees so beautiful. Shobinda used this word double twilight. First twilight is then morning on earth, there is darkness. Suddenly there is the daybreak. So there is a twilight zone when darkness is changing towards light. So that light comes and touches the earth and awakens things into wonderful shapes, and we make an effort. Then the next twilight is earthly real, when it begins to fade. Once again darkness is going to come. So death tells Savitri, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. See, many have come like you. Avatars have come. Heroes have come. Sages have come. I'll show you, they're all in the cold storage. Dead and gone. Revolutions, philosophies, all have sunk into this night. Who are you who claims for divine life upon earth? He says, maybe initially he denies any divine. This is also the stage of evolution of man. He says, I don't believe in all this divine. I am the one. Because ultimately everything comes out of me and everything goes into me. Then he says, okay, I don't want to argue with you. You want to believe there are gods and divine. Okay, maybe. But they have nothing to do with earth. This is my domain. I have never seen one here. Then Savitri insists, okay, there is a God, but he's impersonal. He has nothing to do with life, with world. He's impersonal. He doesn't respond to your prayers. There is no scope of love with that God. He's an impersonality. Na aankhein, na sina, na bhujayein. You are turning him into a being. So this is how slowly death begins to change. And in that last battle is on ground. This is where matter. This is the last bastion of darkness. So Savitri chases him right into his own fort. And death says, see, this is the end of all things. And Savitri says, I do not accept it. And then she gives the logic of creation, of matter, of world, of earth, why it has come into being and it is meant to become this. And she gives number of examples of this transmutation. We'll read it in the next after the break. So, ultimately say, okay, I am convinced with your knowledge. You have knowledge. You seem to be you are speaking of things which even I don't know, but you're very logical. See, all these, death is representing all these Delhi University, JNU, not Delhi University, sir. They are nice guys there. Harvard University, I would rather say that. God, mythology. They are all very, creative imagination at best. Weird imagination. Can a monkey talk and speak a human language, have bhakti? Fool, you don't understand. Even symbols, you are so much engrossed into. This is how when a person looks at life only materially, understands. There is nothing other than matter. So this is how the graduates and postgraduates of the best university produce the worst, least creative people. But anyways, so we don't have to turn toward that because we don't need that. We have so much wealth here. So then he says, knowledge you have. I understand. This is a new knowledge to me, but seems very nice, logical, and I can see it. But tell me, all that is okay, but you know who I am ultimately. You know what happens when you go to a head office and person does not want to do your job. First he will give this logic, this problem, that problem. At the end he will say, you know who I am? Because he wants to be pleased. He says, no. Then you have to, if you really have a great backing, then the person says, do you know who I am? So this is where death says, do you know who I am? How will all this knowledge help? We are debating meaninglessly. Do you have the power? And then comes that moment of apocalypse. Death says, if you have the power, show me. Now you see, this is where Aurobindo brings this new element, that Vedanta must be complemented with that truth of the Tantra. Knowledge without power. And she says why India fell. India in its original days had not only knowledge but also power. That's how they could build and create in every field. So we have learned to ignore power. Even in yoga, when power comes, no, it is to be shunned. So at the end of the day, we knew about the oneself who is a witness but could do nothing. So we have to learn to use power and not misuse it. That's okay. But power is not to be shunned. So Aurobindo says India fell not because of want of knowledge, because there is lot of knowledge here, not because of want of love, there is too much love here, not because there is so much religion, everything, but because of want of Shakti. Because we discarded Shakti, therefore Shakti discarded us. And now we are being challenged from every side to awaken Shakti. You can't go on the, Pakistani borders and say, Vedanta, I'll tell you, you and me are one. We are bhai, Hindi chini bhai, because God dwells in all beings. He will say, okay, I will occupy your country. Don't say anything because it's not your country. How does it matter if there are Indians there or Chinese or Pakistanis? Because all is one. And we were so foolish to say, yes, all is one. So power is necessary, Shakti. But power too can be the power of death. It's a kind of adverse, asuric Maya that creates these illusions. That is also a kind of power, dark. And there is what is known as the white magic, the original power, the transcendent. So at that moment, we see Savitri reveals herself, who she is. See, you remember when there is, at the end, when Krishna is right there and Kans is on the ground, he says, who are you? You have done this to me. Then he sees it is Hari. And same thing in Ramayana. Until now, Ravan, I think he may be God. If he is God, it's okay. But at the end, suddenly, how Rama reveals. He says, Ravan, enough is enough. Let's have between us. And then he realizes who is he in front of whom he is standing. So then when she reveals, death dies. Meaning thereby it flies away, and that grip of ignorance, falsehood, unconsciousness, which is what death represents. Death is the denial of a divine life upon earth. Because of the siege of ignorance, it dies, it flies away. It says, okay, fine, I release the human soul, and now it can know who it is, and then subsequently all other consequences. Several questions which I have already answered, but just to say what is the evidence. See, when death dies, meaning thereby ignorance is receding. Just look at the last 50 years. A kind of surge of spiritual hunger and thirst even in children. How this has come about. Suddenly, a new kind of creative urge which has sprung up. These are just 50, 60 years since the supramental manifestation. This is the beginning. So it flies away. Even scientists are beginning to say even physical immortality is possible. Why? Because it's siege on thought, grip on thought and heart. There are children who are beginning to feel that the world is one family. Their heart is no more confined only to my little family. They're beginning to experience life. So this is how the first steps one can see. It is a long-term project. So normally, in this, in the story, we have these boons which are given. We find here also, Aurobindo very beautifully recounts where death gives all these boons, but denies Satyavan, and at the end, when death dies, he releases Satyavan. What is death of death? It means it is transformed. So Yamaraj changes into Dharmaraj. In the story, in Savitri, the book, Death changes into he who was hiding behind this mask. So Sri Aurobindo brings that original Vedanta where darkness is a self-concealment of light. Light is released from the hold of darkness. This is the original Vedic legend of Angiras and the cows. So even in our darkest parts, there is light which is hidden. That has to be released, which is different from moksha. Moksha is all this is dark, go away. But even in the darkest parts, even the body, there is light which is hidden in the caves. This is what we see in the story of Agastya, in the story of Angiras. They were trying to release it, and then the famous Brihadaranyaka Upanishad's verse, Asadoma Sadgamya, puts on a new meaning. Asadoma Sadgamya is not from darkness to light, but to release the light hidden in the darkness. Asadoma Sadgamya, the truth that is hidden in Asad. Mrityor Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamya, the light that is hidden in the darkness. Mrityor Ma Amritam Gamya, immortality that is hidden in the cape of death. That has to be released. It's a much more difficult process. But it is the logical conclusion. If the divine is hidden in creation, even in darkness, he must release himself. So logically it's true, and now the power is active. So when death dies, soul is released. Now what is going to happen? It is freed from ignorance. So is that the only goal? No, Savitri has come for much more. Now Sri Aurobindo adds this part, one-liner. As it happened with Satyavan, may it happen to all. So she wants this for all creatures. Now for all creatures means that the very climate, atmosphere of earth must change. It's not that one Satyavan will go there, but on earth ignorance should vanish. How is it possible? So she meets the Supreme who was hiding in the cloak of death and darkness. He says, Savitri, I know you are the Divine Mother. How is it possible? Human beings are not ready for it. There is a chain of karma. You will disrupt it because these beings will be without karma. Can you imagine human beings walking with inner freedom, having no karmic bond? The mother speaks about it in one of her talks of 1929 to 31. She speaks of resurrection. She says, for us it means the bondage of karma is gone completely. And yet you act in the world. It's unimaginable. She says, they will be the gods, their chain will be disrupted. So all these problems, when he says, then Savitri says, no, but I want it for earth and men. If heaven can lean towards earth and earth aspire to heaven, not vain their meeting. So then he says, see, I can give both of you a beautiful, wonderful status. Infinite Satyavan, infinite Savitri. Boundless Satyavan, boundless Savitri can lose into each other forever in some ultimate heaven in the beyond. You can join the Ras, which is taking place in Anandalok. So Savitri says, all that I know, I have come from there. You also know this. Beautiful lines which we'll read subsequently. Says, no, my spirit's liberty I ask for all. Imperfect is the joy not shared by all. I want this for all. I keep my will to save the earth and men. Then ultimately, he concedes and says, okay, we'll speak about the description which is very beautiful. That go further where my transcendent supreme, from there only in that Purna Pragya you can get this boon. And she goes and she gets the boon for earth and mankind, which is obviously a boon means it is something of the future, but an assured future. And then we have book 12 where secured of this future, she comes back to earth. Satyavan comes back to earth. They wake up and Satyavan says, beautiful, book 12 epilogue, Savitri, did something happen to me? Did I? This is exactly how transformation proceeds. You look back after 5 years and you say, you were that donkey, how you have changed? Because you have done nothing to change. The other day, And all of us have the same story. When people ask, what sadhana you do? You don't know what you have done. But she has done. Something she does, like a magic inside. Behind the scenes, she is having a dialogue with death. This fellow has given to me, you better release him. So this is how he says, I don't know, I think I have traveled in some worlds and seen upon the face of God. Do you, but and you also, I see a great difference. Then he gets a little nervous. He says, are you still the same Savitri? Or you'll become another Babaji and walk into forest and, suddenly because I see a radiant face, there, she's come from there. And then she says, I am still the same to you, the Madran, the Savitri. It does not abandon earth. Heaven's touch fulfills but cancels not our earths. So she says, I am very much the same. Your sister and spouse, your prone possessor and possessed by you, a mother to your wants. All this she says, I am yours. Then Satyavan is reassured, and meanwhile the king and the party, they come searching, because the king and queen had told Savitri that, look here, come back by evening. So the king, the moment they see, because it's already late, almost night is coming up, and they look at Savitri, they spot her first because she is radiant. So the king says, this is not done of you, Savitri, you never did like this. One day you went out and you didn't come back, he is the light of my eyes. All this he says, because he is overjoyed, but at the same time, without him I cannot have food. And it's already. So, before Savitri can say, Satyavan says. He says, you are responsible for this delay. So, Sri Aurobindo plays with that. He says, yes, lay all on her. She is the cause of all. And then he describes, when I traveled out, I wandered and I went into death, it seems, and she is the one who has brought me captive back upon earth. So actually, everything she is responsible. And then the sages of the woods have come, they see the great change. This is there in the story also, incidentally, that there is Gautama, the sage, one of the sage, he asked Savitri that you seem like a goddess. You have won the victory. So this part is also in the story, that little bit. And so one of the sages asks Savitri, there is a high change in you. What is the secret? And then she reveals the secret. To feel love and oneness is to live. To feel love and oneness is to live. That's the secret. And then they wonder, what has she spoken? Because people understand love, they've heard of oneness, but we don't know what these things are. We have a human understanding of them. And then they turn back towards house to celebrate. Beautiful description of Savitri and Satyavan are on a chariot, and the whole party is going. Now the whole story of that morning when Satyavan must die till late evening, about 18 hours. 24,000 lines, nearly 24,000. 721 pages is a story of 18 hours. It starts from the day it was the hour before the gods awake. This was the day when Satyavan must die. Then the entire thing is about Savitri's birth, her yoga, preparedness, death in the forest, Savitri following the footsteps and bringing back Satyavan. So this is what Savitri is, and so much more. We'll meet after 10 minutes and dip into the Ganges to drink our own portion of joy. Wine of the divine.